About 7,200 students, and almost 17% of them are international. We have programs all the way from undergraduate to master's and PhD studies and postdoctoral studies. And all in all, it's a residential campus with a lot of different unique opportunities. So if you're looking for a medium-sized school, Michigan Tech is a great fit. Both Helen and I, incidentally, are alumna of Michigan Tech. So we both did our undergraduate education here, and now, we loved it so much that we now work here. All right, so on to the topic of today's webinar, which is affording your education in the United States specifically. I'm sure as you are looking at schools, you notice the cost, which you may see as high. Higher education is definitely getting more expensive, but we look at it as an investment. There are so many statistics and studies out there that talk about the value of higher education, what you can do with that degree. So it's something that we're going to talk about today. There's a lot of questions that you guys may have as you are looking at schools and how to afford it. You might not know where to look. You might not know what's available or possible. So we're going to get into those details here today. Okay, so the first question is, how much does education in the United States cost? And there's no easy answer to that because it does vary widely depending on the university. So it depends on a variety of factors. And as you are looking, generally tuition is going to be the first thing that you see, but that doesn't give you the full picture of the cost of the university. So it's important to look at a few different things. So one example is public versus private institutions. Public institutions receive government and state funding. So those typically are cheaper than private institutions, which receive no funding. You might need to investigate if there is a specific international tuition rate. So most usually, for example, here at Michigan Tech, we have an in-state tuition rate, so a rate for students who are Michigan residents, and then we have an out-of-state as well as international tuition rate. So you pay the same rate here at Michigan Tech as students from our neighboring states. So there isn't a specific or separate international tuition rate. All right. Some other things to look at are the fees as well. So there are always fees with any school that you're going to. So you need to see if there are specific international student fees as well as what other fees you would pay and what services those would provide for you. And then a big one that you might not consider is the cost of living. So definitely if the university you're looking at is in a large city, the cost of living is going to be a lot higher than it is in a smaller town. For example, such as Houghton, which is where Michigan Tech is located. And then, of course, you need to consider the length of your degree program. So typically, a bachelor's degree will take 4 years. So as you're looking at costs, which are typically shown to you for 1 year, you just need to remember that you're going to be going to school for 4 or, however many years you'll be going. Okay. So the first thing that you're probably thinking about is, does the university I'm looking at offer any scholarships? So again, there's not one right answer for every university. Some universities do and some don't. But there is, I guess, somewhat a rule of thumb, again, regarding public and private universities. So because public universities do receive funding, they are often restricted on giving scholarships to international students. And private universities don't have those restrictions, so they have more freedom. So here at Michigan Tech, we are actually a unique case in that we are a public university. We do actually provide a scholarship for international students. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But overall, factors to consider when schools are offering scholarships that you're eligible for is the percentage of cost the scholarship will cover. So if you see that it sounds like a lot of money, you need to make sure that that school isn't really expensive. So it's not just providing a small amount of the total cost. You need to see what the scholarship criteria is. So is it merit-based? So it's based on how well you've done in school, or is it need-based, based on any financial need that you have, or any other criteria to see if you're eligible. You also need to see if it's a renewable scholarship or a one-time scholarship. So it could be renewable for a degree program, or if it's just a one-time that you will receive your first semester or year. And one thing to note is that it's very, very, very rare for a university to offer a full ride scholarship. In other words, a scholarship that covers the entire cost of attendance. We always have international students applying to Michigan Tech asking for a full ride scholarship. And the reality is, I would say less than 1% of schools in the U.S. do have that. And those who may offer that are typically also the most difficult schools to get accepted into. And the reason for that is that a lot of scholarships are actually funded by alumni of the university. So typically, the more successful the alumni that the university has, the more opportunities that that university has to offer scholarships. And so you're going to see most of the big schools, sort of the Ivy League schools of the U.S., are probably some of the only ones that would offer a full ride scholarship in terms of public institutions. Okay, and then the last factor to consider is the application process and or deadlines. So if you do need to apply for the scholarship separately from the admission and the general application, make sure you're following all those steps and definitely not missing those deadlines. So to look at the Michigan Tech scholarship that we mentioned, if you applied for admission to Michigan Tech, you would automatically be considered for the International Ambassador Scholarship, which is merit-based. So we do look at your transcripts and how well you've done in school. The amount will range from $1,000 to $6,000 each year, and it is renewable if you maintain a 2.5 GPA for up to 4 years. So you could receive that for the entirety of your degree program. And another question that we get asked a lot is if we can reconsider students for this scholarship after they start at Michigan Tech. So students that maybe got a lower amount on that range and then they do really well here at Michigan Tech and they want to be reconsidered for a higher amount. But that isn't possible, and that's typical for all scholarships. You're considered based on what you've achieved so far at that time of application, and you can't be reconsidered for a higher amount later. All right, so talking about some other resources, as Cassie mentioned, it is very hard to find a full ride scholarship. So the scholarship, if you get one from the university, is not going to cover your full cost of attendance. So we just wanted to talk about a few other resources. All right, so what you see here, these are two different websites that we recommend to students who are applying that they can look into. They're both basically search engines specifically for scholarships in the U.S. So what you'll find on the first website there is typically more of a database of all of the different scholarships different universities offer. And on the second website, you'll tend to find more external scholarships. So in other words, scholarships that may come from a company or organization rather than a university. But these are two good links to start with. Another opportunity, of course, is through loans. So loans are something you can get through a bank a private bank or public bank, as well as a private foundation. There is a foundation called the Paras Foundation that I know we've had many Indian students specifically inquire about. I'm not sure exactly how that process works. I do know that the website is www.isloan.org, and they have relatively low interest rates for the loans, at least at the last time that I had checked, which was about a year ago. So I do know that some of our students from India have found the Paras Foundation to be very helpful. So the UCF is the United States India Educational Foundation, and if you're not familiar with them, one thing that they offer is basically free guidance about selecting universities in the United States, as well as ways to find funding and how to apply for a student visa. It's a free service that they offer. It's offered through the United States Embassy, in fact, about how you can access education in the U.S. But we always recommend that you connect with the educational office, the Education USA, or in the case of India, UCF's office, and they may be able to guide you in ways that they have connections to local resources on the ground. Okay, so working in the U.S. So this is probably the #1 question that Helen and I get from students, international students who want to come study in the U.S. So, you know, one thing is, okay, my family is able to afford some of my education, or maybe I'm able to get a loan, but I'm going to have to work to help support myself. So there's a lot of myths about this, and so we wanted to really dispel some of those now. So the first question we get is, can you work on campus while studying? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes for all students coming on an F1 visa to the U.S. And essentially, every university should have opportunities for international students to work. Now, you can work up to 20 hours per week when classes are in session. So that means that essentially right now minimum wage, at least in the state of Michigan, I think as of January 1 will go up to right around $9 per hour. So imagine if you're working 20 hours a week, making $9 an hour, you can afford at least your personal expenses and maybe a little bit of your living expenses each month. When there is a break, so Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, spring break, and the usually 3 to 4 month summer vacation, you're actually allowed to work 40 hours per week. So we find that a lot of our students work part-time, 20 hours a week during the school year, and then during the summertime, they'll work 40 hours to try to save up money for the following year. So that's definitely very accessible. So some things to consider, though, is that many universities, depending on the size of the university and depending on other factors, they might not have very many jobs for international students. So when you're researching in universities or institutions, you should really research and ask them, you know, how many jobs are available for international students and what kinds of jobs are available for international students. Here at Michigan Tech, for example, most of our jobs on campus, we have hundreds of jobs on campus, and most of them are occupied by international students because we know that international students are only allowed to work on campus. When you receive your F-student visa, you will not be allowed to work anywhere except for campus. So most of our student workers on campus are international students. And they're doing everything from working in the dining halls to working in the laboratories or the library. Basically, any public building on campus is where our international students are working. Another big topic about working in the U.S. is something called CPT and OPT. And these are probably the 6 most important letters for any international student wanting to come to the U.S. So CPT is curricular practical training. And what that basically means is that while you are studying, at some point in your degree program, you are gaining practical experience about your learning. So we have students who will go and do an internship. At Michigan Tech, we call them co-ops. So our international students will go to a co-op at a company. And basically, the companies are looking for students to work up to full-time, and you get paid accordingly. So the average at Michigan Tech, the average co-op hourly wage is $21. which is phenomenal. So you can imagine that if you do a 1 semester or 2 semester co-op and you're getting paid $21 per hour at 40 hours a week, you can save up a lot of money to help you continue your education. So with CPT, what's really important to know is that you have to plan this early on in your studies, and you have to start networking with companies from the time that you arrive to campus. So Michigan Tech, we have 2 career fairs that we do each year, and we have over 350 companies coming to campus specifically to interview students for these CPT opportunities as well as OPT opportunities, which we'll talk about next. Okay, so OPT is very similar, optional practical training, except the difference is that OPT happens after you graduate, whereas CPT happens before you graduate. So OPT is when, okay, you have your degree now, you can use your student visa to work for 12 months in your field. And what's really special about OPT is there has been recent legislative changes in the U.S. which is allowing certain international students to work even longer than that. So if you have a degree from a STEM field, which includes basically anything in the engineering and sciences and even a couple of the business fields, you are also eligible for a 24-month extension beyond the initial 12 months. So you can essentially work for a total of 3 years using your student visa in the U.S. And the idea is that in this time of 3 years that you're working after graduation, hopefully a company will sponsor you for an H-1B visa to stay and work even longer after that. And we find that most of our students have really competitive offers for OPT. OPT is a full-time job for all students, and you're making a real salary. So our average starting salary is $62,000 per year, and that's just an average. Our I believe it's our computer engineering program, their graduates are actually making closer to 70. So but depending on what you study, that is the salary that you will be earning on OPT. So you want to make sure that whichever university you are looking at, they can assist you in the job search. So as I mentioned, Michigan Tech has a career fair. We have a career services office that has many services to students, and we welcome you to check out the link on your screen here. We will help you with everything from creating a resume or a CV to how to act in a job interview. We do mock interviews so you can get some practice, as well as we have an online database that's exclusively for Michigan Tech students to access job postings of companies all across the country and world. So this is something that's very, very important when you're looking at a school, because ultimately you want to make sure that you're going to be able to get a job that will help you to pay back the loan or your parents that you had invested in your education. All right, so that is it for the points of our webinar today. So we wanted to leave some time for questions, and you'll see a few photos again down here of Michigan Tech, and the guy on the right is Blizzard, who's our mascot. So time for questions if anybody has them.
So we have a couple of questions from the students, Cassie. We have a question from Saurav. He's asking, what's the minimum percentage to get in high school required for scholarship in Michigan Tech?
Hi, yes. Okay, so what we do when we receive your mark sheets, or if you're doing IB or whatever the curriculum you're doing, so we convert those to the U.S. scale, and based on the U.S. scale, we convert it to what we would consider an American GPA system. So on the American system, the minimum GPA for a scholarship at Michigan Tech is 3.0, which essentially means if you're in the CBSE curriculum, we're looking for mostly 70s and above. 80s would be great. And so the higher your GPA, the more scholarship that you are eligible for. Students who receive the full $6,000 scholarship generally have above a 3.75 out of 4.0.
Hope that answers your question, Saurav. And we have one more question from Jesse. She's asking, do you provide fashion designing course and are scholarships available for the same?
Hi, unfortunately, we do not have a fashion design program. Most of the programs that we have are in the STEM fields. And so if we did have any program that would be similar, it might be in our visual and performing arts, but it's probably not what you're looking for, to be honest.
And we have this one more question from Saurav. He's asking, can I apply with my 10th class mark sheet because I'm in class 12 and I want to apply early.
Yes, so you can definitely apply before you finish 12th grade and taking those 12 boards, but we will need 3 years of grades. So the 10th board results for sure, but then we will also need your 9th and 11th grade transcripts so that we have more than just 1 year.
Hope that answers your question, Roshan. And we have one more question from student. He's asking, what are the requirements for scholarships?
So for the International Ambassador Scholarship that we mentioned, it's merit-based, so it's going to be based on how well you've done in school. So for those, we will just be looking at your grades and receive your transcripts. And Cassie mentioned some of kind of the GPA and scores that you would require to get part of that scholarship.
Okay. And we have another question from a student who's asking, are there graphics and animation courses offered at NTU?
We have courses that would be related to that. So what we would probably consider the best fit would be in our computer science program or within our computer networking and system administration program. And so within both of those programs, you can customize the courses to what you want to do. So what I would recommend in that case would you would maybe consider computer science and then taking some courses out of our arts program. There's definitely video game design and things related to that. And I believe we also have an animation course, but we could follow up with you individually to confirm.
Hope that answers your question, Saurav. And we have one more question from Maya, student. What scholarship should Indian citizens living in India look at?
Indian citizens living in India. So in that, there's probably many external scholarships within India that Helen and I just couldn't possibly know about all of them. So what we would really recommend is that USIEF, the organization that we mentioned to you earlier, which is part of the U.S. Embassy, they may have a lot of those local resources that Helen and I aren't aware of. So we recommend that you go there. And I believe one second, let me take you to the website really quick. They have actually many locations throughout India.
Actually, Helen, sorry to disturb. The student is asking that what scholarships should Indian citizens living in US look at? It was a typo from the student.
Oh, okay. Sure. Indian citizens living within the U.S. So I need a little bit more information. Are you a dual citizen or are you under a visa category in the U.S.?
She's a US citizen.
Oh, okay. That's completely different. Okay. So U.S. citizens. So in that case, actually at Michigan Tech, we would have you go through our domestic admissions office, not the international admissions, which Helen and I work in. And for domestic admissions, you'll actually be eligible for government financial aid as a U.S. citizen. And so the domestic admissions team will be able to give you more information about the scholarships you're eligible for. Their email address is mtu, the number 4, and the letter U at mtu.edu.
So we have one more question from Roshan, who is asking, does SAT scores are required for scholarship? If SAT scores matter, what is the requirement of SAT score needed?
So SAT scores are not required for international applicants. So we don't use them in the scholarship consideration. But if you are planning to take the SAT or have taken it, we definitely welcome you to send the scores to us, and they can also fulfill the English proficiency requirements that we have. So you could use those scores in place of the TOEFL or IELTS.
And we have another question from Sauro. He's asking, how do I apply with my 9th, 10th, and 11th mark sheet? Can you tell me the procedure, and is TOEFL and IELTS required for it?
Sure. So the first step in applying is always to fill out our online application. You can find it on the website here. And it's free, it's easy to fill out, shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes or so. Once you submit that, you're going to get login information within the next day to a site called My Michigan Tech, which is like a personalized admissions portal for you. So you can track your status, you can see Michigan Tech news, etc. through that portal. And beyond the application, we will need you to submit those official documents. So typically, you need to send your official transcripts by mail, but it is also possible for you to have a school official, such as a counselor, email your transcripts to us. And then beyond the transcripts, yes, we will need an English proficiency test score, such as TOEFL or IELTS, and that will need to be sent as well.
That answers your question, Saro. And we have one question from Jessica. She's asking, can we work on campus in the first year of college?
Yes, you're able to work on campus as soon as you arrive, in fact.
Great. Any more questions? You can always write to us, and we'll also share the details of Cassie and Helen to you. You can always write to them for any questions. And thank you, Felicity, and all our participants for this evening, and hope this session was informative. Also, you will receive an online participation certificate for participating in this session. For any further queries, you can always write to me at guideme@univariety.com. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Cassie. Bye.